Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Bruce with habowskistudio. Today's video is going to be about how I make my frames and cut my panels. Mostly it's going to be focused on the framing that I use. I make my own floater frames, and hopefully I can do a good detailed video for you. I'll have to be taking, of course, my cameras out to the garage where I have my table saw and such, but it's, of course, I'm wearing this today because I'm here in Maine and it's freezing cold outside. So a couple recommendations right off the bat if you're working in cold weather, even during the summer. Watch what you wear up top when the saw is kicking back sawdust and such. Depending on your clothing, it'll like stick to your clothing. So try to wear, like today I'm going to be wearing my winter jacket over this sweatshirt thing because it's very nylon-y, so I can just brush the sawdust off. So think of that when you're sawing up stuff. And of course you don't want anything too loose and sloppy because you don't want it to potentially, like any kind of cords, you know, think safety with the saw. And this video is not going to be about how to safely use your table saw, it's just how I make my framing for my paintings. And yeah, so it's pretty chilly out there right now. It's probably about 12 degrees, and we're supposed to be getting a big storm tonight and into tomorrow, so I thought I'd take advantage of the few hours before that starts to happen to do this video. So leave the comments, let me know what you think. If you have more questions about the process, I'm going to try to really think it through. Sometimes we know something so well and we're just so used to doing it by rote that we may not explain a step effectively. So let me know if that's the case here. I'll try to do my best, and there will be parts that will be voiceover because I need to concentrate on what I'm doing with the saw. I don't want to take any chance of cutting off the fingers because then you won't have any videos unless I use duct tape to tape a brush to my hand. So let's get rolling and see how this goes. Wish me luck. Okay, we're just going to be walking out to my garage and going to check out the saw setup, and then we'll go over that. Okay, here's my components for this process of cutting my frames. I have the, of course, table saw back there, 2 folding plastic sawhorses. I think I got those at Home Depot for maybe $20, $25 a piece. And of course a handy, you can buy this wood already pre-cut 2x4 panels. Just pick you something about a 1/2 inch thick so it doesn't dip when you put it across the sawhorses. And I lay that across the sawhorses for support of the length of molding. So let's get it set up. Okay, here's my table saw. It has the fold-up capacity. The legs fold up, snap in place, and then you can wheel it around with the legs acting as handles when it's all folded up. And this side of the bed, you can see the seam right here. That slides out on rods to accommodate, I think it's 27 inches from the saw blade out that way. So I wanted a bigger saw to be able to cut bigger size panels. And my old saw, and I recommend this if you're going to get into this with making your own frames, start out with a little, I don't know, $129 saw from Home Depot. Just doesn't have a very large bed, but you can get by on like 12-inch panels, 13-inch I think maybe, and that's a good start if you don't have the money. I believe I paid approximately $230, $240 out the door, Home Depot, for this. It's a Ryobi, and I love it. Very efficient, and the capability for the sizes you can cut, it'll pay for itself in no time. So this process is really super easy. So the biggest factor, of course, is having space to set this up. But you can technically, if you got a driveway, you can make a day of it on nice weather and go out there and cut up a bunch of moldings. So let's get going. Okay, now this is the Mdf panel that I use, and it's a 1/4 inch thick. So the depth of cutting I'll be doing on my molding is going to accommodate this size panel. So depending if you use an 1/8 inch, the math will be a little different, but you can figure that out. Now let's show you how I set the saw up. These are the tools you'll be needing: pencil, tape measure, and a straight piece of wood. And see if you can see the line I've made. There is a line scribed, and the height from the bottom of this edge to that line is 3/8 of an inch. That represents the 1/4 inch thickness of panel, and it adds an 1/8 inch so that the panels recess into frame a bit, so when you're stacking frames against one another in storage or whatever, the surfaces don't touch. And this is what I'm going to use to set the saw depth. Okay, now what we're going to first do is move the fence over to the proper cutting that we need to do for the thickness facing of the floater frame. And that is going to be 1/4 of an inch. So we crank this up first to the 3/8 of an inch, the blade. And I'm going to show you how I set this in here to measure that depth. This board with the 3/8 mark, the line, will go right in the center of your blade, and you just crank your blade up until the middle, the highest point of that blade matches up with that line, and that'll dictate your depth of cut. And like I said, in this case it's 3/8 of an inch because I have a 1/4 inch panel and I want a 1/8 inch recess for the panel to sit down in frame and not be flush with the top of the frame. Okay, now I'm going to set the width of the face of the frame, and I'm going to show you a little diagram here of what I'm talking about. Now, as we see, this is going to be the total width. It's not to scale, obviously, but I'm using a 3/4 wide board, and I'm going to set the width of the saw from the fence to 1/4 inch to accommodate the facing width that I want. Normally, I use 5/16 of an inch up to a certain size painting, because then I enlarge that width to be in proportion and aesthetically pleasing to the format of the painting. In this case, this molding is going to be for very small paintings, so I don't want too wide of a face of a frame and be distracting. And that leaves a 1/2 inch area for the painting to set down on when it's completed. So that's what we're going to set now. And I've just taken this board that I created the saw height with and drew a line for the 1/4 inch mark. You can use your tape measure, but because of that little this on the end can be sometimes distracting. So if you do this a lot, you will have this as your jig sort of piece of wood and have it in your studio, in your garage, in a place that's convenient with your saw. And then you have quick setup, kind of a quick setup stick. And you can have different settings here for different depths. I mean, you'll make up your own device, but let me show you. Oops. Okay, everything looks good to start cutting. Now let me show you the lumber. Okay, here's the lumber, and it is 3/4 wide by 1 5/8 deep. Now this is, you can pre-buy this at Home Depot right off the rack. This is not cut to size to this width. I buy it this way, and it's a pretty reasonable cost. Here's the label. Let me show you. See if that comes out. Pan in and hold it for a second. And this works out really well for a common depth for most of my framing. Up to a certain size, then I'll get wider planks and, you know, from a wider plank, and then cut it to size to accommodate the depth. But this is a pretty common board that I use. Now let's show you how I feed it through the saw. Now something you want to look at in your wood here, of course you have the label on the board, and you want to carefully scrape that off with a putty knife or something like that. Maybe get some of that Goo Gone liquid to remove the residue, or you can sand it away later. But I try to make, after I remove the tag, I still try to make this the inside of the frame, not the outside, in case there's any residue left over. I don't run into that in the finishing process. But you want to look at both, flip the board over and look at what is going to be the cleanest side. And also, if you look carefully, either this edge or this edge is going to be smoother, or appear to be smoother, to cut, to have your facing show that way. So I'm going to study the board. Any small defects you want to have on the inside of the frame, and the inside of the frame will always be away from the fence. So this side facing against the fence will be the finish side that you see after you make your frame. So now I'm going to feed it through the saw and show you what we get. Okay, we got the first cut made, and you see how I've oriented them as I cut them and pass through the saw. I put them in that same format when I put them all in place there. You don't want to be flipping them around willy-nilly. You can get confused as to what cut you need to make next. Let me show you. So this edge on the right where my finger is, that's the facing side. When you turn the painting up, you know, to show with a painting in it, this will be the face of the frame. So this is how it was fed in, and now we're just going to turn the board on its side and cut this chunk of wood out with another measurement. Let me show you how to do that. Okay, so we're all chopped up here, and all of this fallout, I call it, these skinny little pieces, get back here, they are useful for some projects that I do around here, but if you're not going to use it, they end up being about 1/4 by 1/4 inch pieces approximately, and you can also chop them proper length, and makes nice kindling for a fire pit or something like that, if you do a lot of this and collect a lot. Otherwise you can save some of it for special projects. And now we're going to get into how I do up some panels. So something you may have noticed in the previous clip too is I stand to the side when I'm feeding wood through the saw. You could, if you're not careful, get kickback, and I had that happen one time, right in the groin area, and that smarted like a, oof, that hurt. So you learn real fast to have, you know, proper systematic ways you do things when you're working with the saw. And also the key is, you saw me, you know, you're not going to get cut with the blade because the blade is not even near coming through the wood, but you want to press down all along that run. Keep your hand over the saw with the wood to make sure that the blade, the wood's not going through like this and cutting where it needs to, not cutting. That's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. You want to be careful of that. Yeah, very, very fast. Of course, when I'm making a video it takes time, but this is a super fast process, and I highly recommend you trying it out because it saves a ton of money. Okay, here are the handy panels that I get at Home Depot. They are 2 by 4 feet and cost me about $7.50 a piece. and this is what they call MDF board, medium density fiber board. I don't use masonite anymore because it was getting difficult to find masonite that was smooth on both sides, because I really need that. I write stuff on the back of the painting, and the rough masonite is a pain in the butt. So this is really great stuff to work with, and of course I gesso it after. So let me show you how I cut some of this down. Now I'm just going to show a little sample. I'm just going to cut off a strip here. I've already previously cut up a bunch of panels, so I don't really need any, but this is how I would, first thing I want to measure out, I'm going to do 8 inches down, because I can get 10 by 8 and a 6 by 8 out of that strip that's left over. So you want to do the math and find out how much yield you'll get out of a size like this. You can even draw out a schematic on a piece of paper first and figure it out before you go committing if you're not really good with math, but I've done this for a while. Now we're just going to cut off the strip and I'll show you. First thing is, we take our tape measure, lift our fence up, generate a lot of sawdust doing this, and then just set it to the inside of the blade, because you want a true measurement at 8 inches, and then you just cut off this strip. Okay, so there you go. Here's your panels. And of course I would cut a bunch of 6 by 8s so you're not changing the saw back and forth, but for demonstration purposes that's what I did here today. And that concludes this video, so I want to thank you for joining me. If you're new to the channel, I want to invite you to subscribe, check out my other painting videos and such, and everybody follow me on my Facebook page, Habowskistudio, where I post works in progress and other art related things. So until next time, bye.